Hey everyone, it's FLAK. When Battlefield 2042 was announced, many players were excited at the notion of 128-player games. I was never really convinced that was the right way to go. In my opinion, bigger isn't always better, and a degree of predictability is important in a game like this. Well, it now seems like DICE has some buyer's remorse when it comes to the decision to double the player count for Battlefield 2042 instead of continuing with the traditional 64-player game modes. This choice has a lot of far-reaching implications, from map size to the general ebb and flow of combat. After a lackluster launch, DICE made improving Battlefield 2042 a top priority, and map redesign is a significant part of that approach. So, in a blog post, developers recently identified 5 major criteria for improving map design, and all of them are directly connected to the game's much larger player count. They are transversal, intensity, line of sight, paths, and cover. Before we get to that, real quick, want to mention I recently reviewed the post-apocalyptic city builder Frostpunk, and you can check that out at gimme.co using the link in the video description. It's a great game with a unique story and interesting challenges, and I took some time to look at some pros and cons. Make sure to follow me on Gimme and check back regularly for new reviews. You can also ask me questions about Frostpunk there. So, back on topic, transversal refers to how long it takes to move from one objective to another. This includes from the base spawn to the first objective, and DICE say that they are taking steps to reduce this travel time. The maps in Battlefield 2042 are some of the largest in the franchise, and that naturally means greater distances between them. DICE even acknowledged criticism from fans who called the game, quote-unquote, a walking simulator, and say they're working to remedy the issue. Developers also showcased a tentative redesign of Kaleidoscope to show how the map layout may look in the future, and I definitely think this is significantly improved over the current iteration of that map. Regarding the overall intensity of combat, DICE actually pointed the finger directly at 128-player game modes. They said, quote, "We know that during certain pushes for the objective, it can get too chaotic when fighting over flags. Either there are just too many players or vehicles, or sometimes the overall chaos can make it feel overwhelming when accurately trying to assess what's happening around you," end quote. This is especially problematic in game modes like Breakthrough, which concentrate the action in small spaces. In fact, I say they are reviewing whether or not it even makes sense to keep Breakthrough as 128 players. A 64-player version of the mode is currently available in Battlefield 2042, and developers describe that as the best experience of Breakthrough, end quote. Another issue tied to map size and that larger player count is line of sight. Battlefield 2042's maps are infamous for this. You're liable to get sniped from someone a mile away in any direction who is simply taking pot shots instead of doing anything productive for their team. DICE admits, quote, "There are presently too many open and flat spaces on some of our maps, which puts too much focus on direct, long-distance combat between objectives," end quote. This has been one of my major critiques of the game, that most engagements are at longer ranges and infantry combat isn't really encouraged. To remedy this, DICE looks to break up lines of sight through things like changing objective locations and other measures like cover, which we'll talk about here shortly. Meanwhile, the sprawling nature of the maps in Battlefield 2042 has created yet another problem. Players struggle to find smart paths from objective to objective. And to be clear, we're not talking about getting from one objective to another, but doing that in a smart way. There's a key difference there. Developers say they see players choosing poor routes that expose them to enemy fire from multiple angles. This, of course, has always been a problem in Battlefield, but previous games provided clearer lanes for players that made the experience less frustrating. A bit of hand-holding to be sure, but in Battlefield 2042, these are noticeably harder to spot and are arguably less effective given the gigantic map sizes and the aforementioned longer lines of sight. You might say that learning to choose the proper paths is part of the Battlefield experience. I would agree, but at this time, Battlefield 2042 kinda needs all the help it can get in welcoming some new players. Lastly, DICE says lack of cover across maps continues to frustrate players. Flat, open spaces, let's face it, they are the worst thing in FPS games, and especially in those with a focus on vehicles. It makes infantry easy pickings and results in longer range and more static engagements. Sparse cover may be a direct result of performance issues caused by player count and map size. Right, this isn't just speculation. There is a reason 128 player matches are only available on PC and next-gen consoles. I say that there are plans to add more cover to existing maps, particularly in more open areas, which is good, but we're going to have to wait to see the final results on that. So overall, DICE seems to have identified some big challenges facing Battlefield 2042, and to their credit, they are soliciting feedback from the community. Specifically on this topic here, and I will leave a link in the video description to a place you can go to submit your own suggestions on how to make the game and the maps better. I will say that we do know adjustments to the maps in Battlefield 2042 will be done gradually, so don't expect to see everything get updated here at once. However, I really feel like I need to ask why they forged ahead with 128 players to begin with. I understand the marketability here, but I am a fan of simplicity, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. DICE actually did substantial research on the idea all the way back during the development of Battlefield 3. Then CEO Patrick Soderlund revealed in an interview over a decade ago that DICE had playtested 128-player games. What they found wasn't surprising. Soderlund reported, quote, "It's not fun, and there's no point in going higher than 64, end quote. So, love him or hate him, he was certainly right about this. DICE's new revelations about player count unfortunately put them between a rock and a hard place. The game would certainly be better as a 64-player experience, but promises have been made to customers. DICE may not be able to walk back access to 128-player game modes because of legal obligations. I don't know, I'm not an expert on this, but maintaining modes with two separate player counts will further stretch out the existing player base. And we'll just have to see. Perhaps intensive map changes can salvage the flagship game mode, but DICE stressed that these redesigns will roll out gradually due to the amount of development time required. I will say, based on the blog post, it looks like Kaleidoscope is going to be the first out of the gate. On the bright side, and some silver lining with this announcement here, DICE mentioned they are taking the lessons learned to heart when designing future maps, confirming that there are at least 2 others in development. No official word on those, though, when we'll see them. Anything like that. Data miners have revealed that one is allegedly set in Canada and dubbed Exposure. Hopefully we'll have more news on what's ahead for Battlefield 2042 at the start of Season 1, which of course begins soon, TM. I am curious about your thoughts on this topic. Do you think DICE should have stuck with 64 players? Do you like playing 128-player Battlefield 2042? Tell me down below in the comments, and leave me your feedback on the maps as well. What do you think should be changed with the existing slate of maps? Are there any problem areas on some of your favorite maps that really need an overhaul? Tell me down below. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If not, a dislike. If you want to support the channel, check out our sponsors down below, or you can keep your money and just share this video. Make sure to subscribe to keep up to date on all the latest Battlefield news. And as always, thanks for watching.